Le sprinkler, meaning.
So I could say goodbye to my agile coaching career. That's over and done with.
Well, no,
been replaced by that tree.
Yeah, and I wish I could say that was true, but being an agile coach myself,
Are you still coaching?
I do actually.
Good.
It's a habit. I'm a recovering coach. I'm doing my best to. No, I'm always coaching, right? So, but the thing is that a coach with the toolkit is far more effective than a coach without. And as you know, there's a lot of coaches out there that might not have the experience to really be coaches, and yet they're claimed to be coaches, right? And that's a serious problem.
It's the easiest thing in the world to become an agile coach. Just change your profile, your LinkedIn profile, and that's it.
That's you probably have to take a 2-day certification course first, but
not even
needed.
Suddenly you're a master, right? After 2 days, but seriously though, it's there's even like the best of coaches still need help, and you can't possibly have the full range of background that you need to coach. You might be a great software coach, but then you've got to coach somebody in finance, or you've got to coach somebody in marketing, and you're out of luck. You're just out of luck. And you're going to sound like an idiot, right? And it happens all the time with these great agile coaches, and then suddenly they're going, trying to coach the finance people to change the way they do funding or change the way to this, and it honestly help them, but they don't really understand finance. And the finance, like I get complaints like this from CFOs all the time, right? They listen to the agile people and they go, it's like listening to my children whine. It's like I have this agile, we've got all these agile coaches, and I would rather go to my 10-year-old and get advice from my 10-year-old rather than these agile coaches.
So Scott,
right? The 10-year-old knows they don't know anything about finance and aren't going to be lecturing me on how to do finance.
Scott, you went there.
I did go there.
Because I've been doing a deep dive in Scott, Scott stuff, and for the last few days. It was actually kind of fun.
You need to seek help.
Maybe I will.
Can I find that elk in your tree?
This is not coffee. The children thing.
Yeah.
It bugs me deeply. For many reasons. For one of the reasons that you're right. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that if I wasn't, in 15 years ago, when I started coaching, if I wasn't that child, that naive person that asked the naive questions to HR or obviously technical teams, obviously, but also HR, finance, and so on and so forth, nothing would have happened. And I enjoy asking those naive questions. We say agile coach, right? Coach.
Yeah.
I enjoy asking questions. It's something I like to do.
Which is okay, but helping people make decisions is also part of that.
Yeah,
guiding them, right?
Yeah, that's the agile part.
yeah, and sometimes the questions are, it is like, if you've got children, if you've raised children, like the questions that of a 4-year-old, they're fun, and often very entertaining, but you don't really take them seriously. It's like, oh yeah, of course, yeah. It's like just the other day, my daughter was trying to convince me that she had seen some type of shark out in the water, right? Because she'd just been reading about a couple of days a goblin shark or so. I can't remember what it was. So she'd been reading about that and watched a video on YouTube. So now suddenly she was a goblin shark expert. And of course, we saw something out in the water, which was probably a wave, but maybe it was a fin. But it was a goblin shark fin. She knew that, right? So she was asking me, about how do you go, how do you spot whales and stuff like that, and then suddenly she was a whale spotting expert 5 minutes later, all this sort of stuff, right? And this is what happens with agile, with many people in general. There's this unfortunate disregard for expertise sometimes, and this is not just an agile coaching thing. This is just a unfortunate societal thing. But the experts in it, the experts in goblin sharks certainly aren't going to listen to my daughter. The experts in finance certainly aren't going to listen to somebody that doesn't, when your question is, what's the difference between CapEx and OpEx? It's all over.
Yeah,
It is
you're done.
over. You are no longer coaching that finance person if that's the type of question you're asking, right? So this, I think, is, it's great they're asking. It's great. My daughter is, interested in goblin sharks or whatever the things were. I don't know. But
okay. Well, let's go about it a different way. If I wasn't naive and stupid, purposely naive and stupid, we'd probably still be doing projects with P+ and macroscope and I ever heard of rational unified process?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still out there in the wild, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I the first few years I was a P+ macroscope killer because it just didn't make sense. Just asking these simple questions. Yeah, true. In the beginning, I wasn't really coaching. I was more like telling people what to do. But that's another story.
Okay.
I learned from those successes and mistakes. I say successes because you actually mentioned it in one of your conferences. Some teams were so horrible. The whole place was just chaotic and just horrible kind of a situation that I would have changed the coffee and things would have been better. I'm quoting you right here.
I've done that. Yeah.
That's from your India conference. I took that from.
Yeah.
How do we? Because we still want to generate change in order to help organization deliver value, have people enjoy what they're doing, help people be awesome, and so on and so forth. How can we continue having that childish approach without being perceived as a child by finance or HR or even IT?
Well, I think it's a thing. It becomes an issue of knowing your limits, and always you always want to go a little beyond your limits. But there's a difference between going 10% past your limits because you're learning and expanding versus you're like 5,000% way past the limit on your level of knowledge. And what do it's like yes, goblin sharks, good, yeah, good, okay, fun, yeah, it was certainly goblin shark, honey. And move on, right? Yeah. So I think that's it, right? So I think there's you see this issue of people who are very clearly junior coaches presenting themselves as the senior enterprise coach, and not knowing any better. I'm sure there's some people that are doing it on purpose, but for the most part, they just don't know better because everybody else is doing it, right? I constantly hear this. I don't know why we're picking coaches so much, but I constantly hear this this lament that, well, it's okay for me to do it because everybody else is doing it too. No, it really isn't. And maybe you should rethink that. Yeah. And you can be you could be coaching for 15 years, but then suddenly somebody comes along and says, could you please coach me about whale watching? And you've never gone whale watching. You don't even know how to spell the word whale. So even here you are an agile coach with 15 years experience. You have exactly zero experience in whales. So how dare you present yourself as a whale coach? And as the whale, a senior whale watching coach, enterprise whale coach, whatever that title would be. So I think, and that happens a lot. So a couple of years ago, before I joined PMI, I was asked out to lunch with a senior executive at one of the big banks in downtown Toronto. And they were on, Agile Transformation 17 or whatever one it was. And it had gone poorly for some reason. And they're trying to
Scott, it's called repeat business, okay?
Repeat business. Yeah. Well, sadly. But yeah, so he's picking my brain trying to figure out what went wrong, right? So he's telling me this story. And it's a big bank, so you know exactly what went wrong, but I'm listening anyways. And he says, so and so, I hired so and so, and she was running it, and I knew her, right? And she was a really smart lady in her late 20s. So here's this lady, very smart lady, without a doubt, in her late 20s, trying to run a transformation at a large Canadian bank. There was absolutely no hope of that succeeding. Zero hope. And sure enough, she crashed and burned because she was in way over her head. And what had happened was, so as soon as I heard it was her again, oh my God, why would you do like, even though she's really smart, not for a large Canadian bank. Sorry. 15, 20 years from now, yeah, for sure. Now, no. But anyway, so he's telling me the story, and I'm thinking I could list off 10 reasons right away, without even listening to this guy, of why she would have crashed and burned, right? And sure enough, the COBOL guys wouldn't listen to her. Kicks, because she got him. Yeah. So getting back to your naive questions, right?
We can say Java now, by the way. It's old. It's pretty old now.
Yeah, it's the new COBOL. Yeah. Well, yeah, people will be programming in Java and COBOL long before, long after we're dead.
We often say COBOL is not dead. It just smells funny.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's anyways, don't pick on COBOL. It's actually becoming a COBOL programmer is one heck of a career move for anybody, for the last 10 or 15 years. So if you want big money, doing interesting things often too. But anyways, back on track. So, but it gets back to the naive questions, right? So apparently, she was, trying to convince some ancient COBOL team to go Agile because Agile's great, rah, rah, rah. And they start saying, well, this isn't going to work because, and you know the story, right? There's a long list of reasons why they couldn't possibly change. And they threw out a term, kicks, right? So for those of you listening, if you don't know what it is, doesn't matter. But
I'm listening. I don't know what it is.
Oh, well, okay. See, that's the problem. Right? So apparently she asked, right? Well, what's kicks? So just asking that question, she might as well have just said, I don't belong in this room to those people.
Just by that question.
Yeah. It's like saying what's COBOL or what's Java, right? You're trying to coach a team of Java programmers, and you say what's Java.
Okay, but I'm dying here. What the hell is kicks?
Actually, it's a color process. Okay,
I thought maybe you just made up that term. I never heard of it. Jeez.
No, yeah. What's kicks? Pretty much every ancient bank runs on it. So it's a transaction processing system. So implemented ACID transactions. So it's from the mid to late 70s IBM product, and all the big banks run on it. So when you process
I think your range of like 10% or whatever, and you have to take that in consideration, because I often coach one-on-one coaching. IT, except for kicks, IT doesn't have any much more secrets for me, but I often do one-on-one coaching with people I have no idea what they do. Like CXOs, for example. I've never been a CIO or a CTO. I was a developer for many years, so I can full of empathy and understanding and so on and so forth. But see whatever. I don't know. I just don't know. But I do coach them.
Yeah,
but this is not agile coaching though. This is coaching like one-on-one. So it's a little bit different, but a
little bit different. Yeah. So the problem is that these ancient COBOL dudes were dealing with issues that were phenomenally complex, because it's almost by definition, right?
And sensitive.
So just by asking the question, she didn't belong in the room.
There's always that risk of losing credibility. And it
was all over. And her lack of kicks expertise wasn't the problem. It was just the lack of expertise, and it's just that she just thrown in the deep end of the pool with an anchor around her neck, basically, right? So
I just started coaching a team where
she was amazing. I would have hired her on the spot, but not for that sort of a thing.
I just started coaching a team that they use Mendix. I never heard of it. But honestly, it did not penalize me in any. I'm sure other things penalized me.
You got lucky,
but could have.
It might have. Yeah. See, that's the thing. You don't know, right? So, and this is the problem. It's like, what naive question is going to shoot me in the foot? And if you've already built up a reputation, like if they know you, if you're a known factor, then not knowing Mendex or kicks or whatever might not have been an issue. But when you're going into a room cold with a hostile team, and hostile is probably being polite, and then ask, so what's kicks? or what's COBOL? Like that would be equivalent to asking what's COBOL.
Yeah, you start at -1 basically. Yeah.
So we're starting at like -100.
We've been ignoring Mathieu for a while. I'm so
okay,
excited. I'm so excited. I'm talking to Scott Ambler that Mathieu was out of my scope.
It's okay, guys. I need a little bit more caffeine just to get your level of energy. But
Mathieu, you got the stage.
Crying on the inside.
I'm just curious, Scott. In your example, how could DA could help that young lady? Because instead of shooting herself in the foot, how could she use the DA toolkit just to navigate in that situation? Could you help us on that one, please?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. You'd think they would, seeing as I've used that example several times. But so if she knew how to use the toolkit, then instantly she should have understood. I would hope she would have understood that, this is a team that's dealing with a bunch of legacy stuff, right? So let's go look into legacy options. Now, if she still blurted out what's kicks, then it's going to be, nothing's going to help her there. But she should have known, oh my God, these guys have been dealing with COBOL for 30 or 40 years. Maybe they're dealing with a little bit of legacy stuff. Maybe I should, look into, what's it like to deal with legacy situation? And then, legacy architecture. And then maybe she would have stumbled into kicks or at least would have, known to ask, walk me through your existing architecture or walk me through your existing technology stack or whatever, right? Like that's a reasonable question. Whether, and it's a bunch of guys, so whether old guys, so whether they're going to answer is another story, but more than likely they would, right? And it's like, well, here, let me draw. And then suddenly, you'd go down into, this deep swamp of IBM technologies that you never wanted to learn about anyways. So, but at least, but she still would have been in play, right? Mm-hmm. And then she would have learned the horror story for why, being able to deliver once a month would be phenomenal rocket science in this situation, as opposed to, trying to push them for, let's deliver daily. Or even probably delivering quarterly would have been a good thing for that team. But anyways, so that's the, it's just this deeper appreciation for the situation that they're in, right?
At a minimum, build some empathy towards that team by reading what's available.
And that's a very good point, right? Because what's interesting is when you start diving into some of the goals, you start realizing, man, there's way more to this than I would have thought. And actually, I don't know if you know him, Daniel Gagnon in Montreal. He walks through. He's got this really good presentation on DA and the goal diagrams, where he basically takes one. I can't remember what goal diagram. It doesn't matter. He takes one of the goal diagrams, and it's got all these options, right? 30 or 40 options, whatever. And it's like, how horrible this is. It's so complicated. But look at what the methods do. And then what he does is he blanks out all the stuff. And only shows, here's what Scrum advises, or here's what SAFe advises, whatever method he's picking on at the time. And like 95% of the diagram is redacted, right? And that's his point. It's like, you're being told what to do. Yes, it's hard to make choices. And yes, it looks complicated because what you do is complicated. Like what this COBOL team is doing is phenomenally, horribly complicated, which is why they're still around. And why they'll be around for many, many years to come. So this is the challenge, right? Is understand that having empathy, or at least understanding, if not empathy, for the challenge, the complexity of the challenges that we face, right?
Absolutely.
And this is this I think is the challenge I get from executives when they say, talking to these agile coaches is like talking with children. And I hear that a lot. Like, this is not just a one-off. I've been hearing this for years, and sometimes a little more polite than that, sometimes not so polite. Way, four-letter words get used sometimes.
I love it when a new Scrum Master or Agile coach says, well, the Scrum Guide says, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck what the Scrum Guide says. I don't care.
Can you imagine? Yeah, can you imagine talking to an experienced, finance person and an experienced architect, and say, here's what this 13-page body of knowledge says. And meanwhile,
it
this
went
person's
down.
been doing their job for 30 or 40 years. They probably have a university degree or two in it. And then this clown's coming along with a 13-page body. Yeah, we should hold a 15-minute stand-up meeting today. Who cares? Like, really?
It will change everything.
It might not work. It might not be very successful.
Or might work. Who knows, right? But maybe a 15-minute stand-up meeting is the way to go for this situation. Probably not. Or it might be a little more sophisticated than that. But anyways, so this, I think, is the issue, right? Is having a better understanding, having a better appreciation, and even just knowing your options. Like it's interesting when we'll train we'll train like existing senior Scrum coaches or senior Scrum masters or whatever they are, and very often we'll I'm not doing as much training anymore, but I used to do a fair bit, and every so often you'd get some Scrum master was forced to go, right? The team is going on the DA training, and the expert, the local expert's being forced to go, and they're sitting there like this, like, you can't possibly teach me anything because I'm awesome. Okay, fine, whatever. And literally at the end of the first day, every single time I've had somebody with that attitude at the 9 a.m. on the first day. By the end of the first day, they're coming up and saying, "Oh my God, I had no idea that there were solutions for some of these issues that we've been struggling with for months. And not only are there solutions, but there's multiple choices." Yeah, I know, no kidding. How about that?
Yeah.
Who would have guessed?
But I get similar reactions because 50% of my training just deal with human beings and human behavior and psychology and psychosociology. So they're like, "Oh, that's why." Okay. So.
Well, yeah. You mean somebody studied this? Yeah, there's people have
ever heard of Tuckman?
How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would have been maybe a nice addition. I'll share a story. I coach a team in a large financial institution, a bank. Actually, it's not a bank; it's a financial institution. We're not allowed to call it a bank. We get in trouble when we call it a bank. And this team, on average, started programming professionally in 1983. I'm not going to tell them to do Scrum, for crying out loud.
No.
I just sat down in a room with these guys and girls, they're both, and I said, "What do you want to do?" I said, the only constraint, okay, and basically I just pick one out of a hat, basically. I said, the only constraint is quick feedback. What do you want to try?
We could try this. Radical. Yeah.
Sorry?
That could actually be a radical change for them.
Thankfully it went well. They appreciate it because they went through so many different methodologies throughout their
they're burned out
40 years of experience. I'm not going to tell them to do Scrum or Kanban or anything, basically. I just and they basically together we built a thing that and we had 1 hour daily synchronizations, I guess. 1 hour every day. Sure, why not? And this was we were not confined at that point. We were still working. This was pre-COVID, and so yeah, sure, whatever. And then they reduced it. I said, what if we reach the same result, okay, but in 30 minutes instead of 60? You guys interested? Yeah, sure, yeah. So if you allow me, we'll create. I just said we'll do a parking lot, and the people that are concerned with this specific subject will do that. But what I could have done is. Maybe print out concepts of DA and leave them lying around, and they could reference it. Say, yeah, maybe we should do inceptions. Yeah, inception sounds good. Yeah, we should try that, so on and so forth. And maybe give them like a buffet of possibilities.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah, and you can guide them along too, right? Because it's also, when they're talking about something and that's that's an architecture issue. Mm-hmm. Well, with that much experience in the team, the problem's going to be, they'll be, sharing war stories forever. But it's just that'll be an easier team. Might be an easier team to coach, because all you got to do is say, yeah, sounds like we have an architecture problem. Wonder what we should do about that. And there's probably enough expertise there to do that. And maybe there's not. And if there isn't, then bring the toolkit up. Because so like I said earlier, it really, the toolkit's based on like different levels of expertise, right? If you're expert in that, then maybe at best you need like a checklist. Just I remember that technique. Let me tell you about this. Blah 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 blah. And then because
that's the way we used to do it,
so they've forgotten about it. Right?
And that's the way we used to do it. I hear that often.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they just forgotten about it. Or I'm allowed to do that. I thought this was Agile, right? So I thought we could only do Post-it notes. So there'll be that sort of stuff going on. Whereas if it was a team of newbies, or if there were some newbies and the newbies might need a little more guidance, right? Whereas the expert people, they just need a little bit of a prod, and boom, they're off and running. So it really does depend. Is the situation. Absolutely, and as a good coach, you've got to know what it depends on, and then how to prod people, right? And that's not something that a junior coach is going to know, right? So as a more senior coach, you just inherently know this. The more junior folks aren't going to know that. But at the same time too, you've got to have enough expertise to know, it sounded like an architecture problem, right? Ding. You might not have that. These
are solutions that exist.
Yeah. This is one of the things you get in the DA training is that you see, well, wait a minute, there's a wider range of stuff out there than just user stories and epics and Post-it notes. So I think, and it's just this eye-opening thing. And it gets back to my earlier point, where we get these experienced Scrum people, and they've been doing a great job for years. But then suddenly it's like, you're welcome to, you're now thinking outside of the Scrum box, and look, there's this wealth of material out there that you'd never even heard about and hadn't thought about, right? And it's like, I didn't even know there's solutions to these problems that we've had for years.